My parents gave my sister $100,000 for her wedding and told me, "You do not deserve any help." I cut all contact that night. 3 years later, my sister drove by my $2 million house and called our mother crying, asking, "Why does she have that?" That question was the victory. But to understand it, you have to understand the air I breathed growing up. From the outside, we were the Hartmans, a perfect Boston family. My father was a successful surgeon, and my mother was a university lecturer. We lived in a tidy colonial home, with precisely trimmed hedges, and the kind of framed vacation photos that lined the hallway, creating the illusion of flawlessness. Yet, inside that quiet house, a strict, unspoken hierarchy governed everything. Victoria, my older sister, was the sunlight. She had our parents' classic features, their easy charm, and she wrapped their immense expectations around herself like a birthright. Every achievement she unlocked was met with rich, warm approval. And then there was me, Audrey, the one they constantly reminded to try harder. I was the dark shape in the corner of their polished portrait. While memories of Victoria's triumphs arrive softly for my parents, mine often hit me like sharp glass. I remember sitting at the mahogany dining table, the smell of roasted chicken heavy in the air, while my father bragged about Victoria's private school accolades. When the conversation finally shifted to me, the tone would change instantly. It became lighter, obligatory, and ultimately dismissive. "Lily's independent," my mother would often say to friends, a polite smile glued to her face that never quite reached her eyes. "She's used to figuring things out." Independent was their careful, polished word for overlooked. It meant I was the daughter who was not worth their worry or their investment. I started working at age 16, saving every stray dollar in a chip jar, hidden under my bed for college. That same year, Victoria received a brand new car, complete with a celebratory dinner. Simply for passing her driving test. The car was not a gift, it was a status symbol, proudly parked where all the neighbors could see it. When it was time for me to leave for college, I packed my rattling, used Toyota that I had financed myself. Victoria, 4 years earlier, had left in a sleek and silver sedan that my father had proudly parked right in the driveway, the neighbors watching then, too. I watched them watch me as I drove away, carrying the knowledge that I was given a harsh lesson, while Victoria was given a clear asset. Still, I spent the entirety of my 20s trying. I tried to be enough. I tried to make myself visible in their world. I carved out a steady path for myself in digital marketing. It was not a glamorous job, but I was good at it. Exceptional. Even. I consistently delivered results at a mid-size agency. But even this steady success was never enough for the Hartmans. Whenever I mentioned my work, my mother's lips would tighten into a thin, disappointed line. "You could have chosen something more meaningful," she would sigh. Already picturing me in a white coat, like my father, or standing in a lecture hall like her. Their vision for my life was simply a mirror of their own. I understood then that my job was not just judged, it was actively dismissed as being beneath the family standard. The standard they held was not high. It was impossibly narrow. The pressure to achieve their conditional love was immense, but it was also profoundly isolating. I lived my life constantly under their shadow, feeling like a perpetual footnote in their perfect family narrative. All I had ever truly yearned for was for them to see the real me, the capable, hardworking daughter who was building her own way. Instead, they had given me the cold, hard certainty that I was perpetually second, forever undeserving of the effortless support they granted my sister. This chronic ache was the inherited shadow I carried into every single interaction. It was in my late 20s that Ethan entered my orbit, and his presence immediately highlighted the emotional vacuum my family had created. He was a software engineer with gentle eyes, a patient way of listening, and absolutely zero interest in the approval games the Hartmans played. With him, I finally felt something unfamiliar ease. He did not see me as the shadow sister or the family disappointment. He saw me entirely. And it was the most validating experience of my life. I was naive enough to hope that if I could not be enough on my own, perhaps Ethan could be the acceptable asset that finally bought me entry into their warmth. The first time I brought him home for Thanksgiving, the temperature in the room dropped instantly, a palpable chill that settled between the silverware. My father sized him up in mere seconds, his gaze sharp and calculating. My mother asked questions that sounded like compliments, but were laced with polite suspicion. Then there was Victoria, glowing beside her fiancé, Andrew, a man whom my father often bragged about for his remarkable connections. Victoria gave Ethan a polite, bored smile before diving into another story about Andrew's impressive corporate lineage. The message was clear. Ethan was steady, but he was not a status symbol. He did not elevate their image. I tried to ignore the familiar tightening in my chest, that quiet, practiced acceptance of being second. I had learned to internalize the slight, to pretend it did not hurt. But something shifted that evening, when my father tapped his glass for attention and launched into a congratulatory speech about Victoria's upcoming wedding. The pride in his voice was warm and rich, a golden sound I had never once felt directed toward me. He spoke of tradition, reputation, and legacy. I realized then that my parents' love was not a steady river. It was a tightly controlled faucet, and I was perpetually standing outside the stream. I did not know it then, but that Thanksgiving dinner was only the first trimmer. The actual breaking point arrived quietly, disguised as a casual Sunday dinner. My parents claimed they just wanted to talk. Ethan and I arrived at the colonial house with cautious optimism and a decent bottle of wine. I kept repeating to myself that this was the chance. Maybe the chance to feel like a part of the family instead of a footnote. The moment we stepped into the dining room, I felt the stiffness in the air. The table was set simply, with no festive celebration in sight. My father did not even look up from his scotch glass when he greeted us. We made small talk while the lasagna cooled on the counter. Weather, traffic, Ethan's job. Not a single question about our engagement. Not one mention of our future. Finally, when my mother poured coffee, I took a breath and shattered the polite surface tension. We wanted to talk about the wedding, I said, my voice steady despite the anxiety twisting my stomach. We are keeping it small. But we hoped maybe you would want to be involved. My father set down his mug with a soft, clinical click. And what exactly does that mean, Audrey? The tone in his voice was not confusion, it was thinly veiled accusation. Ethan leaned forward, his composure unwavering. We are not expecting anything. I just thought a conversation would be respectful. My mother folded her hands, the wedding ring on her finger catching the light. Respectful is following the traditions of this family. Victoria understands that, she always has. There it was, the comparison, sharpened to a blade. I swallowed, refusing to break eye contact. We are not asking for $100,000. Just support. Emotional support. My father exhaled through his nose, irritation radiating off him like heat. Audrey, your sister has made choices aligned with our values. She is marrying someone of her standing. She is invested in maintaining our family's reputation. My mother's voice followed, landing like a second, softer blow. You haven't. Ethan straightened beside me, ready to argue, but I lifted a hand to stop him. Don't, I whispered. I knew I needed to hear this final truth, maybe more than I needed their help. My father looked me directly in the eye, the surgeon's precision in his tone. You don't deserve any help. The words landed on the polished hardwood like a dropped scalpel. Cold, exact, irrevocable. Something inside me went still. I did not shatter or break. I just became perfectly still, like water moments before it freezes. Ethan started to say something I cannot remember. A protective surge of anger. My mother added a soft, detached comment. It's for your own good. Which was almost worse than the insult itself. Victoria was not even present, yet somehow her presence filled the room, her perfect framed photos on the wall, serving as the silent justification for my punishment. I placed my napkin neatly on the table. We should go. My mother reached out, but it was too late. She murmured my name, but there was no warmth in it, no regret. Just habit. On the drive home, Ethan held my hand, thumb brushing over my knuckles, but I barely felt it. My father's final words echoed in loops. Settling into vulnerable places I thought I had patched up years ago. You don't deserve any help. By morning, that echo had hardened into pure, cold resolve. I knew exactly what I had to do next. I walked forward into the light of a new day, ready to cut every single line connecting me to them. Cutting contact sounded dramatic when I had first said it out loud, but in practice, it looked strangely ordinary. That Monday morning, I woke up, made coffee, and sat at the small kitchen table beside Ethan. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting narrow stripes across the counter. I opened my phone. Staring at the family thread. It was filled with old photos of vacations I was not invited to, and updates about Victoria's wedding, planning that I had read with a quiet, persistent hope that they might somehow involve me. I paused, took a deep breath, and tapped. Leave conversation. The screen blinked, and the entire thread was gone. Next, I blocked my parents' numbers, and then Victoria's. My chest tightened with the fear of finality, but it did not break. Instead, it felt like finally undoing a complicated, agonizing knot I had been carrying for years. Are you sure, Audrey? Ethan asked gently, his voice low. I admitted honestly, looking out the window at the moving traffic. But I know I cannot keep living like that. Constantly begging for the scraps of their approval. And so, I stopped. I threw myself into my work with a singular focus that bordered on obsession. My agency was chronically understaffed and overworked, and for the first time, I was grateful for the chaos. It was the perfect environment for someone desperate to stay busy and channel pain into productivity. I pitched new, riskier ideas, volunteered to take on the most difficult clients, and discovered a profound truth. I was not just good at digital marketing. I was exceptional. I understood people. I understood stories, and most importantly, I understood how to build a brand identity that resonated, something my parents had failed to do with their own. Clients noticed. 3 months in, I received my first major promotion. 6 months later, a prominent technology company requested me specifically, stating they loved the clarity and grit in my proposals. My internal goal shifted entirely. I was no longer working to prove them wrong. I was working to build an indestructible space for myself. A year after cutting the cord, I quit my secure job and launched my own digital startup. I took 2 co-workers with me, a brilliant developer named Alex and a sharp designer named Sam, who believed in my vision more profoundly than my family ever had. We worked out of a tiny, shared office space above a busy coffee shop. It was the kind of place where the ancient heater rattled loudly in the winter and the windows perpetually fogged in the rain. But the energy in that cramped room was electric. Every single day felt like building something out of thin air. A structure that belonged entirely to me, piece by piece. There was no inherited wealth to cushion the risk, only grit and late night deadlines fueled by cheap coffee. Ethan was there through it all. Completely and unconditionally. He would show up with takeout when I worked until 2 in the morning, give quiet, necessary pep talks when the pressure felt crushing, or just offer a silent hug. He never once resented my ambition or the hours it demanded. He actively fueled it. His belief in me was the steady, non-transactional support I had needed my entire life. By the second year, Our client list had tripled, and we were no longer just surviving the startup phase. We were truly thriving. Investors started reaching out, sending emails full of large, impressive numbers. I would stare at their offers and vividly recall my father's voice telling me what I did not deserve. It was ironic. I thought, how success sounded completely different when you earned it in absolute silence. Meanwhile, my parents were exactly where I had left them. Far away. There were no tentative birthday cards, no random, just checking in, texts, nothing. Their absence, which had once felt like a gaping wound, slowly transformed into a strange kind of clarity. It was a profound relief, like a constant, low-level buzz of anxiety had suddenly been switched off. Their silence affirmed the decision. They had never missed me. They had missed the image of the daughter they expected me to be. And once I failed to conform, I was easily erased. I realized that the only person I was still accountable to was myself. And that realization was more empowering than any inheritance they could have offered. My startup continued its exponential growth, fueled by the relentless energy of a person who knew exactly what happened when she failed to fight for herself. My company was not just surviving. It was building real wealth, and the quiet satisfaction of that fact was its own reward. Funny how the things my father prized most, reputation, success, and capital, came to me only after I completely rejected his system. I had achieved everything the Hartmans valued, but crucially, I had achieved it without them. Ethan proposed. The night we signed our first truly enormous contract, the one that validated every single late night and every single risk. We were not at some elaborate, staged dinner. It was just the two of us on our tiny apartment balcony, the city lights humming below us. He held out a simple, elegant ring, not flashy, not a status marker, and he said, "I want to build a life with you, Audrey, one that does not hurt." Tears came, not from shock or surprise, but because for the first time in my entire life, someone had chosen me, completely and unconditionally. I was not chosen for my features, my connections, my potential to reflect their status. I was chosen for who I was, for the grit and the fire they had tried to stamp out. It was the moment I realized that unconditional love was not a myth, it was Ethan. When we began looking for a house, the goal was not to impress anyone. The house was not meant to be a trophy or, initially, an instrument of revenge. It was meant to be proof. Proof that choosing myself had not ruined my life. Proof that the path they scorned was actually stable and prosperous. Proof that I was not the disappointing daughter they claimed I was. We settled on a modern, glass-lined place nestled in the hills outside the city. It had clean lines and large windows that faced west, catching the intense afternoon sun. It was expensive, undoubtedly, but every cent that went into the purchase had been earned by my company's success. It was the physical manifestation of the empty space they had created. And in that space, a beautiful, strong life had grown. We moved in on a warm summer evening. The sunset hit the tall windows and filled the house with a blinding, honest gold. Ethan wrapped his arm around my waist as we stood on the balcony overlooking the quiet neighborhood. "This," he whispered, "is only the beginning." I looked out at the rolling hills and believed him, finally free of the anxiety that had been my lifelong companion. But I was too focused on the peace to notice the gathering storm just beyond the horizon. I had built an impenetrable wall of silence. But I had forgotten that every successful person leaves a digital footprint, and in the modern world, a house is an unmistakable beacon. The quiet, earned peace lasted for 6 idyllic months. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. Sophia lived a few houses down. She was the neighborhood watch coordinator and the kind of friendly acquaintance who knew more than she let on. "Hey, was that your sister driving past your house?" I froze mid-sip of coffee. Sophia had met Victoria once, briefly, at my small, registry office wedding. She knew exactly what she was seeing. Before I could formulate a reply, another message popped up. She stopped across the street, just sitting in her car, staring. Then she sped off fast. A cold prickle worked its way up my spine. 3 years of absolute, unbroken silence. And now this. The golden child. Peering into the window of the life she assumed I could never build. Ethan glanced over from the kitchen island, his brow furrowed with concern. Everything okay? Odd. I did not answer right away. I held the phone, staring at the text, realizing that the wall of silence I had built had just been breached. Victoria had seen the undeniable proof of my success, and that sight, I knew, would be enough to trigger an event. Had worked 3 years to avoid. The peace I cherished was about to be challenged, and the trophy of proof was suddenly going to be put to the ultimate test. The cold prickle from Sophia's text message quickly worked its way from my spine into my resolve. Victoria had seen the undeniable proof of my success, and the 3 years of silence were about to shatter. I put down my coffee mug, feeling suddenly ready for it. I had long assumed I would never have to finish. Later that same afternoon, my phone rang with a number I had not seen since the night my father told me I did not deserve any help. The contact name was still listed simply as Mother. For a moment, I considered letting it ring, letting the past dissolve into voicemail oblivion. But curiosity, and a strange need for closure, won. I swiped to answer. Audrey. My mother's voice came through, thinner and sweeter than I remembered. Sweetheart. We think it is time we talked. The immediate use of the overly affectionate term was a warning sign. I gripped the phone tighter. Why now? I asked, keeping my own voice flat and unyielding. There was a brief, telling beat of hesitation on the line. Victoria mentioned she was in your neighborhood. She finally admitted. She saw your home. It is quite striking. There it was. Not regret, not love. Not worry for my well-being, but recognition of value. They were not calling because they missed me. They were calling because they had realized I had accrued something they could use. We would love to visit, she continued, pushing forward with manufactured enthusiasm. Rebuild, start fresh. We are family, after all. Fine, I said, my answer surprising even myself with its speed. I was done running from the ghosts of their expectations. This Saturday. 2:00 in the afternoon. When I hung up, Ethan was already watching me from across the room, his expression a mixture of worry and pride. You agreed to see them? He asked, walking over to me. Yes, I confirmed. I realized that 3 years ago I walked out of their house in pain. Now, they are coming to my house because they are in need. The power dynamic is completely reversed. I am not running from ghosts anymore, Ethan. We spent the next few days preparing, not emotionally, but strategically. We discussed every possible angle. Ethan was brilliant in this, helping me anticipate their transactional approach. I knew they would try to appeal to sentiment, to guilt, to obligation. I would meet them with the simple, solid facts of the life I had built. We offer neutral hospitality, I dictated. Coffee and pastries on the patio. Nothing intimate. Nothing that suggests we are offering closeness. Just space. I was not offering them my heart. Only a controlled window into the results of my hard work. I was not seeking reconciliation. I was arranging a confrontation on my terms. Saturday arrived, bright and polished. As if the sky itself wanted to provide perfect lighting for the impending show. We set out the coffee service and a plate of expensive, neutral pastries on the modern outdoor patio table, ensuring the glass railing offered a pristine view of my meticulously maintained property. 1:58 in the afternoon, the security gate called. A family of 3 for you, Miss Hartman. My hands felt steady on the cold glass of the patio door. The feeling was not fear, but a heightened sense of alertness. I felt strategic, calculating, ready for the battle ahead. I knew exactly why they were there. and I was going to make them say it out loud. The silence was over, and I was holding the reins. The black sedan rolled up the driveway precisely at 2 o'clock. My father stepped out first, his shoulders stiff, his silver hair catching the sharp afternoon light. My mother followed, her smile too wide and clearly practiced. Then came Victoria, looking noticeably smaller and clutching her large purse, like a life raft. She had the uneasy look of someone who knew they were out of place. I opened the door, standing in the foyer of my earned home. "Come in," I said, my voice measured and utterly devoid of emotion. My mother's eyes immediately began darting around the open concept foyer, taking in the architectural details and the sheer scale of the space. "Your home is lovely, Audrey," she murmured, the admiration sounding grudging. "Thank you. Let us sit outside." We moved to the patio, the sunlight hitting the glass railing and reflecting the quiet neighborhood. It was peaceful. Too peaceful to the emotional storm I knew they were carrying. We sat around the outdoor table, Ethan beside me, his presence a silent shield. My father cleared his throat, adjusting his posture. "Audrey, we are glad you agreed to see us. It has been too long." "You chose the silence," I replied softly, letting the undeniable truth hang in the air. An awkward beat passed. My mother quickly jumped in, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "Families make mistakes, sweetheart, but we are here now, and we would like to reconnect. To start fresh." I studied her carefully, waiting for the performance to end. "Why?" She blinked, momentarily thrown by the directness. "Because we miss you. That is all." Another silence followed, longer and heavier this time. They knew I did not believe the lie. And they knew I would not let them leave until they told the truth. Finally, my father leaned forward, his polished fat head cracking just slightly. He said the real reason. And my stomach dropped, not from shock, but from the realization that they were exactly as predictable as I had always feared. "We have hit some financial difficulties," he confessed, his voice tight with humiliation. "The settlement from the malpractice case took more than we expected, and it has created significant capital constraints." He continued, barely meeting my eyes. "I am consulting now, but rebuilding my name after the litigation has been challenging." My mother quickly picked up the thread. "And Andrew, while his startup is sound, it could truly take off with the right investor, someone with resources, Audrey." Victoria finally spoke, her voice small and brittle with desperation. "We thought maybe you could help, Lily." She used my birth name, a transparent appeal to the past. There it was. Not love, not apology, just raw, desperate need. "See," I said quietly, the buzzing in my ears starting again. My mother smiled, clearly relieved that the hard part was over. "We knew you would understand. Family supports family, just like we supported Victoria's wedding." My jaw tightened, the memory of that night, flooding back the $100,000, and the cold, surgical rejection. Ethan's hand brushed mine under the table, a reminder to stay calm. My father pressed his advantage, laying out the required sum with his typical clinical precision. $200,000 would get us through this year, settling the outstanding debts. And another $200,000 to help Andrew launch properly. A total of $400,000. My mother nodded enthusiastically, completely oblivious to the insult. "It is nothing to someone living in a house like this, Audrey. A house you clearly built very quickly." The statement was meant as a compliment, but it felt like a demand. The cold clarity that had settled over me 3 years prior intensified. I looked at their faces without searching for approval, without shrinking myself into their shadow. They had finally come to pay tribute to the life they had tried to prevent me from building. The dollar amount, $400,000, hung in the bright afternoon air. It was a staggering sum, yet they had presented it as a simple formality. I'd an expected family transaction. That familiar buzzing in my ears became a sound of profound clarity. This was the moment for the truth, not for polite negotiation. Before we continue, I said, my voice cutting through the tension, there is something you should know. 3 pairs of eyes. My mother's nervous, my father's defensive. Victoria's bewildered, lifted to me. Victoria drove by my house earlier this week. I continued, stating the fact without inflection. She called you crying, asking, why does she have that? Victoria's face flushed pink. She shot an anxious look at our mother. Mom told you not to tell her that. She hissed under her breath. Someone who actually cares about me did. I corrected her gently. My father's jaw hardened, recognizing the shift in control. Audrey, that is enough, he commanded. No. I replied, meeting his gaze directly for the first time without searching for approval. It is not enough. You did not come here because you missed me. You came because you realized I became something without you. And now you want a piece of it. My mother gasped dramatically, placing a hand over her chest. How can you say that, Audrey? We did everything for you. You gave Victoria a life of open doors, I countered, the words coming easily, and with the practiced calm of 3 years of self-reflection. You gave me a lesson. Earn everything yourself or get nothing. I paused, letting that sit with them. And when I chose to earn it, rejecting your narrow, transactional system, you cut me off long before I cut you. You gave Victoria the $100,000 because she reflected your image. You told me I did not deserve any help because I didn't. My father leaned forward, his anger finally breaking through his composed exterior. You are being dramatic. We did everything for you. I held his gaze. You gave me standards I could never meet. And pain that pushed me to build a life without you. And now you want what I built. Victoria's eyes suddenly glistened, and for a fleeting moment, she looked less like the golden child and more like a lost girl. Audrey, we are family. I felt my resolve soften, but only slightly, and not for her, but for the life she carried. I had learned from Ethan that my strength was not found in cruelty, but in choosing my own boundaries. I am not giving you money, I stated, the finality ringing clear. Not for the lawsuit, not for Andrew's venture, and not for past debts or imagined obligations. My mother stood abruptly, trembling with disbelief. After everything we gave you, you gave me years of trying to earn what should have been freely given. I interrupted quietly. I am done regretting things that kept me small. I looked specifically at Victoria. I will do one thing, however. I will set up an education fund for your baby. Victoria's lips parted in shock. You would do that? Yes, I confirmed. It will be in the child's name only. Substantial fund. No withdrawals for anything else. Because your child deserves a future, untouched by this family's dysfunction. My father scoffed, regaining his voice. You think you can dictate terms to us? I am not dictating anything, I said, rising from the table. The movement signaled the absolute end of the meeting. I am choosing boundaries. You came here for money, and you are leaving with something better: clarity. You do not have access to me anymore. Not my resources, not my time. And certainly not my peace. My mother's voice wavered, her face crumpled with disappointment. You will regret this when we are gone. I regretted trying to earn your love for years, I replied, standing taller than I ever had in their presence. I am done regretting things that keep me small. I stood, signaling the end of the meeting, resolute and calm. Ethan moved smoothly, opening the patio door for them. One by one, they walked past him. My father was stiff with barely suppressed anger. My mother was visibly trembling with disbelief, unable to fathom the loss of control. Victoria paused, really paused, catching my eye before whispering, "Thank you for the fund." That small, genuine thank you was the only acknowledgement of defeat I received, and it was enough. When the black sedan disappeared down the hill, vanishing beyond the trimmed hedges, I finally exhaled. The tension that had coiled in my shoulders for 3 years, and truthfully for my entire life, finally unwound. The warm afternoon sun was on my back. The house stood quiet, steady, and entirely earned. Ethan slipped an arm around my waist, his presence a solid comfort. "You okay, Aud?" I nodded, resting my head against his shoulder. "I think this is the first time I have ever been okay," I admitted. Real revenge is not cruelty. It is peace they cannot touch. In the days after they left, the house felt different, lighter, as if someone had opened every window and let the toxic air of the past drift out. I kept waiting for the familiar sting of guilt, the ache of second-guessing, but neither came. Instead, there was a quiet steadiness in my chest. A profound sense of having finally stepped into the life I was meant to live, a life lived entirely on my own terms. My parents did not reach out again. Not to argue, not to apologize, not to demand the fun details. Their silence this time felt different, not like cold rejection, but like a grudging acceptance of a truth they could no longer bend. I was not theirs to control anymore. Victoria did send a short, formal message a week later, confirming the information for the education trust setup. Nothing more, nothing less. It was the first time she had ever spoken to me without superiority in her voice. A small, quiet acknowledgement of the new balance between us. Work continued to thrive. My startup signed another major contract, and Ethan and I found ourselves settling into routines that did not carry old wounds or hidden agendas. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I would sip coffee on the patio and look out at the hills beyond our home, thinking about how close I had come to shrinking my life to fit their vision. Instead, I built something bigger, something mine, something authentic. I have learned that family is not defined by blood, by wealth, or by their expectations. It is defined by who shows up with a love that does not need to be earned. If my story of finding peace through boundaries resonates with you, know that if you have ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up, you are certainly not alone here. There is always another truth waiting to be claimed.